Page 14a, Yud Dalet Amud Aleph. We mentioned yesterday about greeting someone before you daven. And we mentioned that whoever greets someone before they daven, it's as if they made him into a bama, which is an altar outside of the Beis Hamikdash. And we brought a pasuk, Chidlu lachem min ha'adam asher neshama biyaput. And the pasuk ends there, and it uses the word bama. It says bameh, but we darshan, we understand that because there's an extra letter, it could be, we could read it differently, and we read it bama. It's considered that he built or he made this person into a bama because he is going to him first before he's serving Hashem. And the Gemara asked a question on that from our Mishnah, because our Mishnah said that a person should, at certain points in davening, would be allowed to greet someone. And here we're saying before you finish davening, you can't, before you do the Shemona Esrei, you can't greet anyone. And so the Gemara answered. The Gemara answered that the greeting someone when you bump into them is not a problem. Greeting someone by being mashkim lepischoi, if you're going special to see them, that is a problem. We also brought down from Shulchan Aruch that there are different opinions as to what extent or to where this applies, if it's talking about bowing down, if you're bowing down to the person, if you are saying the word Shalom Aleichem using Hashem's name to greet the person, or does it apply even to just saying good morning? And the Shulchan Aruch, it was obvious if you're just bumping into someone and you're saying good morning, that's not a problem. That's a given. When you bump into someone before you daven, you are definitely allowed to say good morning. But there are different opinions about the Shalom Aleichem, and if you're going to bow down to them. Of course, it's not so popular now to bow down to people, but in the olden days, that was more, I guess, more applicable to know the halacha. We are now going to continue. The next Gemara, there are different ways of reading it. In the Gemara that's printed, our Girsa has it. Rav Idi bar Oven said in the name of Rav Yitzchak bar Ashian that it's also for a person to la'asos chafetzav kedem sheyispalo. It's prohibited for a person to do their job, to go to do work, or to do what they do things that they want to do before they daven.
They deserve
their obligations, their responsibilities. So it's prohibited for a person to do these type of things. These, I guess the simple translation would be work. That you wouldn't. It's not appropriate for a person to do their work before they daven, as it says, "Tzedek lefanav yahalech v'yosem lederech pa'amov." That tzedek, which Rashi says means davening, that makes you righteous before your Creator. Tzedek, first tzedek lefanav yahalech. First, make yourself before Hashem tzedek, and afterwards yosem lederech pa'amov. Then you can go to your way and do your obligations, do your needs, do your job, your work. Now, the next Gemara says, "V'amar Avidi bar Ravin, Amar Rab Yitzchak bar Ashian, Kol ha'maspalel v'achar kach yotze laderech." If a person davens and afterwards goes on their way, HaKadosh Baruch Hu oisalei chafetzav. Hashem will do for you
What he desires.
what you need to accomplish, your needs, your obligations. Hashem will make everything work out for you. And the way this Gemara reads the verse, it uses the same verse, but it reads it a little differently. Shenemar, as it says, tzedek lefanav yahalech. First, you put before you tzedek, which refers to davening. And v'yasem l'derech pa'amav, v'yasem l'derech pa'amav, Hashem will make your steps successful. Hashem will do that. In other words, it's not you doing that like the previous understanding, but it means that Hashem will do that. So these are the two teachings here, that a person shouldn't really do work before they daven, and a person should not go travel before they daven.
Rabbi,
Yes.
I think in plain language it means take care of your own interests first. Take care of the davening first, then your interests will be taken care of.
So the first Gemara said that,
Whether it's work or not,
okay, chafetzav is like your needs, your obligations, right? Your interests. Okay, that's a better
Your
translation.
desires.
Your desires. Okay, good.
yeah.
Your desires. But I think that includes not only work, but it does include work.
Right.
Okay, good. So the question is, what are the exceptions to these rules? So of course, if you are going to go in a group of people are traveling and they're not going to wait for you, so you would be allowed to travel with them, or you're getting on a plane and you didn't daven yet, so you would be allowed to travel, to travel with them. Or if you're traveling already before the time comes to daven, obviously that's not an issue. You're traveling before it's time to daven. That would not be an issue. And then the question is, when it comes to doing your things, like to what extent is it only things that are take a lot of your time? What if it's just a very small thing? You want to mail a letter. Can you drop a letter off at the mailbox? I mean, it's not like it doesn't involve much toil. If you want to fix your door lock before davening, so that takes might entail a lot. You might end up missing davening. You might forget about davening. You might, you're doing something that involves more energy and more concentration, and doing something like mailing a letter, maybe that's considered, not really much of, it's not really much involvement. It's a one moment type of thing. You're just driving by the mailbox. Let's take a look in Shulchan Aruch, where it says that it's in chapter 89. Sif Gimel. Let's take a look what the Shulchan Aruch says about this. So it says here, it's prohibited for a person to be misasek b'tzrachov, to engross themselves in their needs, or leilech laderech, or go on the way, ad sheyispalel tfilas yud ches until they daven shmeina esrei. And why does it say lehisasek? So b'tzrachov. Now, he does bring down that before it gets light, you would be allowed to do work, and you shouldn't do anything until you say the Brochos, the morning blessings. And what happens if you have workers that, you know, you have to give them their job? So he mentions that
Rabbi, could I ask a question?
yeah.
Approximately how long does this process take, the brachas and the davening in the morning before it gets light? I mean, just a ballpark figure.
Well, the
Acceptable,
blessings, the morning,
acceptable, what is acceptable, in other words?
the morning blessings generally take about 2 minutes, and the davening takes about a half hour.
Okay.
Maybe 20 minutes, 25
And
minutes.
all of this is before it gets light.
No. 2 things. If you want to do work, you got to do it. You could start work if you wake up extra early. It's not time to daven yet. Then you do your work. You could work. Otherwise, if it's time to daven, you really should daven first and then do the work. So that's where it applies if it's not light yet. But if
the time of davening is what time?
So you have until 4 hours of the day to daven. The Shema you have until 3 hours of the day. So, and this is
light.
men.
When it's
Men haven't
light, it's 4 hours and 3 hours, the time period.
Right. So the Shema has a little earlier. So sometimes if you're going to miss the Shema in your davening, you could say Shema early, and then you daven later.
I see.
And if you miss the 4 hours of the davening, you have until midday to daven.
I see. Okay. I'm sorry to bother you. I don't know.
That's not a problem. Don't worry. So I was just reading here in the Mishnah Brura about the person who is misasek b'tzrachov, a person who it said is not allowed to be involved, engrossed in their tzrachim. And I see he has a little note here on the side. Sif Katan Lamed Vav. He mentions here about would you be allowed to buy challah for Shabbos or other Shabbos needs before davening, because this is not your own needs, this is Hashem's needs. So that would be allowed. That's for Hashem. But here it's talking about for your own needs. That would be a problem. But so he mentions. So it's interesting that in Shulchan Aruch he uses the term lehisasek, the tzrachov, which seems more like a asek, something that involves a toiling or involvement, not just dropping off a mail, a letter. I'm not. It doesn't say it clearly, but it just seems from the term used. And then it says some are lenient that after a person says some of the morning blessings before Baruch Sha'amar, you could be lenient. And it's good to be machmir in this, good to be more strict. In other words, not to do anything. And
right.
He compares it later on. There's a statement later on that they seem to find some type of a contradiction here, and And the reason they find the contradiction when it talks about traveling, well, let me read this for you again. It says it's prohibited to be engrossed in your needs or to go on your way until you daven Shemona Esrei. And some are lenient after you said morning blessings, before you said Baruch Sha'amar, and it's good to be machmir. Now, what it seems like is this second statement, that if you said the morning blessings, it seems like it's going maybe only on the traveling, that the traveling, if you're traveling, as long as you said the morning blessings, it's okay. And then it says not to eat or drink, and that's another law that we've spoken about regarding eating or drinking before davening.
Oh my.
And generally nowadays it's permissible to eat or drink before davening. People are hungry, they're going to not be able to concentrate. So it talks about that here later on. But we've spoken about that in our classes. We've come across laws about that. Now, what happens if the place that you're going to, you will be able to daven in a shul there?
Wow.
And so it really depends on how urgent the matter is that you're going for.
If the thing involves your safety and your family's safety, and you haven't done anything, you're allowed. I mean, if somebody's trying to break into your house, or if somebody is trying to hurt you, I mean, in the middle of.
We're not talking about cases of danger. We're talking about normal life.
Just normal everyday stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the story. But you have to compare this law to this other law where it says that some say that person shouldn't travel from a city that has a minyan you should shouldn't, you for sure, a person who goes on the way, and you should really, you should travel an extra four mil, which is 72 minutes to get a minyan, and to go backwards up to 18 minutes in order to daven with a minyan. Some say for sure you shouldn't get up early to go to a city that 1 second. Leilach Meir. You for sure shouldn't get up early and leave a city that has a minyan, and you're going to miss that minyan if you're going to go to your place and you could reach it, you could get there later. And you won't have to go alone later. You should really wait till the place where you live in is davens, and you should daven there. So the question is, how could you even think of traveling even without a minyan? You're not allowed to travel. That's a little contradiction that they deal with, because here it sounds like it's talking about the main issue is you're missing a minyan, but what about the fact that you didn't daven?
Can I interject?
Just 1 second.
Okay.
So the answer that they give is that as long as you said the morning brachos, there's leniency. And here we're telling you that if you're going to miss the minyan, then for sure you shouldn't do it. So that's basically how they deal with that contradiction. So in general, it's better not to travel if you are before davening. And especially if you're going to miss a minyan and you have a minyan where you are, you should wait till afterwards. Obviously, there are scenarios where you have exemptions. You have to go to a doctor appointment. You have other necessities, but there is a emphasis here on trying not to travel before davening. Yes.
I remember staying with my Orthodox grandparents. My grandfather would say blessings. We would go with him to Dania to feed the cows and come back, and then he would daven. And he must have been following exactly the Orthodox, because they came from Poland. And I never could understand why he would say the prayers so quick. I couldn't even barely understand them. You know, I was about 10 years old.
Right.
Then he would take us to the farm and he would feed the cows. Then we would be, come on, hurry up, all right, we got to get back to the, and then he would put on the everything. And I didn't understand why. Now I understand.
Well, you should know there's another law involved as well, and that is you're not allowed to eat before your animals eat. And so he was really extra careful to feed them,
My God,
that they shouldn't suffer. And you have to feed your animals before you eat.
Wow.
So that's another law that might have been involved there. And that's what he was trying to fulfill. Okay, we're going to go back to the Gemara. And the Gemara that we're up to is Amar Reb Yoina. It's the first word on the line, 6 lines up from the bottom of the page.
This is
And it says, Amar Reb Yoina, Amar Reb Zera. Reb Yoina says in the name of Reb Zera, Kol Halon, Shivas Yamim. Whoever sleeps 7 days, B'loi Chaloim, without a dream, Nikra Ra is called bad. If you sleep 7 days and you don't have a dream, you're called bad. Shenemar, as it says, V'sovea Yolin Bal Yipaked Ra. Literally, it means a person sleeps satisfied, no bad will happen to them. But another way of reading it is Sheva Yolin. If a person sleeps, Al Tikre Sovea El Sheva, don't read it Sovea, satisfied, rather read it Sheva, 7, that you sleep 7 days, Bal Yipaked, and you're not accounted for, you're not reminded, you're not given a dream, Ra, you are bad. And what that means is that Hashem is giving you a dream to have so to speak, a relationship with you. And if you don't have a dream for 7 days, it means Hashem doesn't want to speak to you.
Oh my goodness.
At least that's the literal understanding of this Gemara. There's obviously much deeper ideas, but I'm just translating the words. That's more or less how the simple translation would go. That you slept 7 days and you didn't have a dream. That means that Hashem doesn't want to speak to you, so to speak.
Incredible. This is fascinating.
Rabbi,
Yes.
Rabbi, I can also translate it. I can translate it that if you only see the good in things, if you see the silver lining in everything, then nothing bad is going to happen to you. When you sleep satisfied, you're satisfied with what you have, nothing bad is going to happen to you because you don't see the bad.
Okay, well, I mean, what is the simple translation of the pasuk? Savea Yolin. Let's take a Tanakh over here.
Happy in what you have.
Mishlei 19. So the simple meaning of the verse is Savea Yolin here. Let's see, verse 21. Many designs are in a man's heart, but the counsel of Hashem only it will prevail. Rabbis machshavos levish. We say that pasuk every day. that longing for a person is for his kindness, but a pauper is better than a rich man who deceives. And then it says, the fear of Hashem brings life. Such a person will rest sated and not be remembered for evil. So we're talking about a person who fears Hashem. Fear of Hashem brings life, and he will rest sated and not be remembered for evil. That's the simple translation. So Ve'ayol, if he has fear of Hashem, he will rest sated and not be remembered for evil.
That's a totally different.
That's, well, yeah, that's a simple simple reading, but the Gemara is translating it instead of sated means he will 7 days.
Right.
And then the end you translate a little differently as well. So that's the simple, again, that's the simple meaning of the verse, and then that's the Gemara's explanation.
One thing in the Steinsaltz, it says that they use the word evil, right, instead of bad. One who
Okay.
sleeps for 7 nights without being visited by a dream is called evil.
Uh-huh. I just think it's just how you want to translate the word. It
Yeah,
means
it's
the same thing.
strange. That's strange, I find. Yeah.
So the next Gemara says,
Rabbi,
yes. Yeah.
yeah, because you don't remember the dream doesn't mean that you didn't dream.
Have it. Uh-huh. That's a good question. I was wondering about that. Is there a source that everyone dreams every single night and there's no question about that, or is that not a given? Is that a given? And not everyone
Proven,
remembers it? Or is it possible a person doesn't actually dream? Does anyone know?
There's scientific proof that you have to go to a certain level in order to sleep, and your subconscious is having the dreams, and that when you're conscious, in other words, they put those electrodes on your head, and they have proven that everyone dreams every night.
Uh-huh.
It's necessary for good sleep.
So no matter how bad your sleep is, if you're asleep, you're definitely having a dream.
Rabbi,
Yes.
No,
Uh-huh.
Rabbi,
Okay, 1 second. Ezra wants to say no. Says Ezra,
unnecessary.
what did you say?
I said not necessary. I think REM sleep, which is the random eye movement,
Uh-huh.
that's it's one of the levels, but it doesn't mean that you have to dream.
So it's possible to sleep without dreaming.
Yes.
People sleep nights without dreaming.
I don't
Okay. So according to Ezra, the Gemara means simply that if you don't have a dream. According to Susan, it would mean that you maybe don't remember your dream. In other words, if everyone dreams every night, then the Gemara obviously means that you just don't remember your dream. But I think Ezra's sounds more connected. It sounds like the Gemara is referring that really means you didn't dream. So I would like to say that that's the correct explanation, but I'm not a scientist, so I can't. I'm not a doctor, so I can't really choose which way of thinking is correct. Yes, Ben. What did you say?
I think that Ezra is right, and what Ezra is referring to is deep sleep. If you only sleep 2 hours a night, you're not in a dream. But if you go into deep sleep, that's when you might start dreaming. So
So
depends
and
on
that
the
has to
length
do,
of time that you sleep too.
right. So that's another question. Is it, does a person dream only when they sleep deeply, or is it any level of sleep? As long as they're asleep, they dream. And so maybe that's that might be connected to this. If it's some people are very light sleepers. If they're very light sleepers, maybe they don't dream even if they sleep for 8 hours. Could be they sleep very lightly. I don't know if that's connected, light sleep or not. But in any event, this is a statement based on a pasuk And so it's a way of translating the pasuk. And I think what it teaches us is that if we concentrate on holiness and we become holier people, we will have Hashem coming to us in our dreams, meaning Hashem will be speaking to us. And it's brought down that tzaddikim, a lot of the questions they have by day are answered at night, because Hashem, so to speak, gives them the answer and while they're sleeping. So there's a concept of Hashem revealing himself to us or to our souls. Our souls elevate. Well, we know our souls leave our body when we sleep, and the soul goes up to, the soul is able to connect with holier levels than our body allows it to, because the soul is no longer limited to the body during sleep. So therefore, it has that ability to connect closer to Hashem if we're on the level. Yes, Yehuda.
So Yaakov, when Yosef disappeared, Yaakov was sad, and God didn't speak to him. So does that mean he didn't dream either?
That's possible. That's an interesting thought, that he didn't have that because of sadness. Hashem doesn't rest in a place where there's not happiness.
Right.
There has to be chedva and happiness and joy. So maybe that's an interesting thought. I'm just wondering if this connects the Gemaras, because the previous Gemara mentioned about the neshama is only in the nostrils, and I mentioned that according to Hasidic writings, the soul spreads out to the body after davening. So here we're continuing talking about the soul going to heaven, leaving the body. So it's like a Gemara that talks about where the soul and what happens, and that the soul should be able to receive more revelation from Hashem during sleep. And then the Gemara continues, and it says another statement. Amar Reb Chia. Amalei Reb Acha bereid Reb Chia bar Abba hachi Amar Reb Chia Amar Reb Yochanan. Another statement that kol hamaspia atzmei midivrei Torah v'lon. If a person satisfies themselves with Torah and then they go to sleep, ein mevasrin oisai besurois rois. We don't give him bad news. Shenemar, as it says, Savea Yolan, if he sleeps satisfied with Torah, Bal Yipaked Ra, he won't be given bad news. He won't be told of anything bad. And the verse, of course, as I brought down earlier, the verse starts off with fear of heaven. So the literal translation, this fits a little better with the literal translation of the verse, because the verse started off, fear of Hashem brings life, and such a person will rest sated and not be remembered for evil. And we're translating it to mean a little differently than the simple meaning, that fear of heaven of Hashem brings life, and such a person who will rest sated with Torah, which is connected to fear of Hashem. So he'll rest sated because of his Torah, satisfied with his Torah, and he won't be remembered for evil. We're translating, he won't be told of any evil. You won't be reminded of any evil, won't be given any bad news. Which again connects this idea that person goes to sleep and their soul is able to, they went to sleep with Torah, so their soul is able to reach higher levels in their Torah learning when they go to sleep. Next Gemara goes back to our main point in this chapter, which was talking about interruptions in the Shema and after the Shema, and how does a person say the end words of the Shema. So now we're up to the next part of our Mishnah. Elohein ben aprakim chulu. The Mishnah said these are the in between the chapters, in between two chapters. Where do the chapters end of the Shema and of the blessings of the Shema? And now Amar Rabavo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabavo said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Halacha Rabbi Yehuda. The halacha follows Rabbi Yehuda, the Amar that says, Ben alakechem liyemes v'yatziv lo yafsik. So again, the Mishnah had told us that there's an argument is in between chapters considered after Shema to the blessing of Emes V'Yatziv. So the first opinion in the Mishnah said these are in between two chapters. The first blessing and the second blessing Shema, Shema to V'Hayim Shemaya, V'Hayim Shema to V'Yomer. And then it said V'Yomer to Emes V'Yatziv is two separate chapters. And there you would be allowed to interrupt according to whenever it's considered two separate chapters, in between two chapters where you're allowed to interrupt, that would be considered in between two chapters. And then Rabbi Yehuda argued, and he said that between Vayomer and Emes V'Yatziv, a person should not interrupt. So I should mention there is an argument among the commentaries. So what does that mean? Let's think about this for a second. We spoke about interrupting in the middle of a chapter, and we spoke about interrupting in between two chapters. So one rabbi in our Mishnah, the Tanakama, the first opinion, said that between Vayomer and Emes V'Yatziv, which means between the chapter, the third chapter of Shema, and the blessing after Shema, you are considered to be in between two chapters. So you would be allowed to interrupt there the laws that apply to interrupting between two chapters. What about interrupting what about the other opinion? The other opinion says you're not allowed to interrupt in between those two chapters, between the third paragraph of the Shema and the blessing after the Shema. You're not. The other opinion says you're not allowed. Rabbi Yehuda, he says you're not allowed to interrupt. Now, what does he mean? Does he mean you're not allowed to interrupt at all, or does he mean you're not allowed to interrupt the lenient interruptions of in between two chapters, but you are allowed to interrupt as long as you consider it one chapter and you're interrupting in the middle of a chapter? This is considered in the middle of a chapter, and you could interrupt in this and that's in the according to those laws. Or does it mean you're not allowed to interrupt at all? They're like, this is a rule that's beyond the laws of in the middle of one individual chapter where we said certain interruptions would be allowed. Here, you're not allowed to even do those interruptions. So this is an argument between the later commentaries on the Talmud. To what extent, how severe, how serious is it that you're not allowed to interrupt between Vayomer and Emes V'Yatziv? Again, it's a little unclear in the Mishnah. The Mishnah doesn't say to what extent you're not allowed to interrupt. We know it's not considered two separate paragraphs, according to Rabbi Yehuda, but is it considered one paragraph that you're allowed to interrupt mipnei hayira, for fear? Or is it something that overrides that and it says you're not allowed to ever interrupt at all? You're not allowed to interrupt this even for those interruptions that are called mipnei hayira. So that is a debate, that is a discussion among the commentaries. But besides for that, let's just understand the Mishnah itself. The Mishnah, the simple meaning of the Mishnah is that there's an argument if the last paragraph of the Shema and the first paragraph, the blessings after the Shema, is that an area where it's considered two separate paragraphs or not? And we had two opinions. And now the Gemara says that the halacha is like Reb Yehuda. Let's read it inside, 2 lines up from the bottom of the page, 14a. Amar Rabavo Amar Rabbi Yochanan halacha k'Reb Yehuda da Amar bein alakechem liyemes v'yatziv lo yatziv. So the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda that says between alakechem and emes v'yatziv, a person should not interrupt. This was Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, and that's the halacha. The Gemara says that you're not allowed to interrupt. The question is why? Why? This it sounds like two separate paragraphs. I mean, this emes v'yatziv is not part of the Shema. It's not even in the Torah. Emes v'yatziv v'nacham v'kayim v'yashav v'neman v'chav v'nechman v'noyim v'noyim v'adir. These are not. This is not part. It's not written in the Torah. Where is why isn't it two separate paragraphs? So Amar Rabavo and Rabbi Yochanan, my time at Rabbi Yehuda. What's the reason of Rabbi Yehuda? Why can't you interrupt? The chsiv because it says, there's a verse that says, V'Hashem Elokim Emes. It says, Hashem Elokim is truth. And because of that, it carries with it a strong, powerful message that when we say Hashem, the end of Shema is Hashem Elokeichem, in the next word, the blessing of the Brochos Kriya Shema, the blessing after the Shema starts with the word emes. Those words go together hand in hand, and which means that emes goes on both. It goes on the previous words and it goes on the future words, and therefore you're not allowed to interrupt. And that's why we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, and it's based on this verse in Jeremiah that says Hashem Elokim Emes. And the Gemara then asks, so we're not allowed to interrupt between emes because the Shema is connected, very connected to the word emes that's after it, and therefore you can't interrupt. The Gemara wants to know what happens if you stopped waiting for the chazan. You said Hashem Elokeichem Emes, you finished the Shema, and now you're waiting for the chazan, or you interrupted after the word emes to say Shalom Aleichem Mipnei Hayira. So again, you didn't interrupt between the Shema and emes, because that we said you're not allowed to, or it's at least an argument if you're allowed to. But let's say after you said the word emes, now you interrupted Mipnei Hayira. You're in the middle of a paragraph, Brochos Kriya Shema. You're allowed to interrupt Mipnei Hayira to say Shalom Aleichem to someone who you're afraid of, or who you have an obligation to have fear of, or awe, reverence of. And so or if you just said Shema and you said emes and you waited, do you now repeat the word emes, or do you just rely on the previous emes? Because you've waited, maybe you should repeat the word emes, or you've interrupted, so maybe the word emes you should repeat and continue. So the Gemara asks, Chayzer v'yomer emes, or einoi chayzer v'yomer emes. Again, we have now turned the page. We're on 14b1, and the question is, do you repeat the word emes or not when you interrupt or when you stop? Amar Rabavo, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabavo says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Chayzer v'yomer emes. So Rabbi Yochanan is the source that you repeat emes again. Rabba Omar, Rabba says, Einoi chayzer v'yomer emes. You do not repeat emes. So it's an argument if you repeat emes or not. And then the Gemara says a story. Hahu de Nachis kamei de Rabba. Someone went down before Rabba. Shamei Rabba damar emes emes. And Rabba heard that he said emes emes. Trei zimni 2 times. Amar Rabba kol emes emes tafsi lahai. So Rabba said, like, it seems like this guy is grabbing as many emeses as he can. Well, he's saying emes too many times. Now the Gemara continues, and it says, Amar Rabbi Yosef says, Kama ma'alya hashmaitza. How wonderful is this teaching? T'chi asa Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda Amar. When Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda came, he said, Amri b'ma'arava, in the west, we say, and Rashi mentions over here, before I continue, Rashi mentions over here that Kriya Shema in the evening, you don't read the portion of Shema of tzitzis completely because there's no mitzvah of tzitzis at night. But you start it and you interrupt it, you skip some of it, and then you conclude with Ani Hashem Elokechem Emes. So now let's read it inside the Gemara. So when Reb Shmuel Bar Yehuda came, he said that in the West, Arvis for Ma'ariv, for the evening service, Daber el Bnei Yisrael, all you do is you say the first verse, Daber el Bnei Yisrael, v'amarta aleim, for part of the first verse, I should say the second verse, and you conclude, Ani Hashem Elokechem Emes. So that's how they said it in the West. Again, you have to keep in mind that the mitzvah of tzitzis, this is relying on the fact that the mitzvah of tzitzis is not applicable at night. Tosfos here discusses the fact that if it's a zman grama, that tzitzis is considered a mitzvah saseh shazman grama. It's limited by time. That's why women are exempt from the mitzvah of tzitzis.
Are women also exempt from saying that portion of the Shema at all times? Then
So
would women be exempt from saying the portion on the tzitzit since they don't even put the on?
right, I don't
Good
believe
question.
so. Again, you have to understand that there's other elements to the Shema. For example, the Exodus from Egypt that's mentioned there, and that's important, as well as the fact that we recite the Shema with all the 248 words of the Shema, and
Oh, yes,
it would seem that the
that's important.
tradition of women davening includes the entire Shema, so it's not you can't really get out of it. You have to understand also that there may be some differences from the way we see things before they were established, like in the Gemara, and the way tradition has things the way they're done according to the minhag nowadays. So in the West, it says that they used to skip a portion of the Shema at night, because it was all about tzitzis. So the Gemara now asks, Amalei Abaye, my mal yusa. What's so great about this? Especially because there's some problematic issues with this, that they would skip. So Amar Rav Kahana says, Amar Rav, in the name of Rav, lo yaschil. Don't start the third paragraph of the Shema in the evening. Vim hischil goimer. But if you did start it, then you should finish it. So that itself sounds like a problem, because what are you doing starting it then? If you want to skip the middle, don't do it half. If you're going to skip it, skip the whole thing. Once you say a little, then you got to finish it. And what is considered starting? Maybe you will say that this that he started, that's not really called starting. You got to do a whole verse or two verses or something, 3 verses. That's called starting. If you start, then you got to finish. Here you hardly said anything. It's not a problem. Maybe you'll say you'll claim that, and that's why it's not an issue. And if you're going to say v'amarta alehem, the words quotation v'amarta alehem, those words that you said, that's not considered a starting. Leihavi aschala. That's maybe not called a starting. That's not true. Amar Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak. Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak said in Amar Rav, in the name of Rav, Daber el Bnei Yisrael leihavi aschala. If you just say Daber el Bnei Yisrael, that's not considered starting. But if you say v'amarta alehem, once you add those words, that's considered starting havi aschala. So we see that you started, you should finish. So how did they do it in the West? Why are you thinking this is such a great statement? And in fact, it sounds like it goes against the halacha. It sounds like it goes against the law, because you're not supposed to start it and not finish it. If you didn't start it, then we can see there's maybe a leniency. But if you started it, then you got to finish it. They hold. Rav Papa says that they hold in the West, which means in Israel. They argue on one little point of these statements that you just mentioned, and that is that what is considered starting. And they argue and say that v'amarta aleim is not really a aschala ad amar v'asu lahem tzitzis. Until you say that they should make for themselves tzitzis, until that point, it's not called starting. You haven't mentioned tzitzis yet. Therefore, you are allowed to just skip the whole tzitzis part and conclude in the end, Ani Hashem Lekechem, and that's it.
That's because they don't put.
So this is the argument between the Eretz Yisrael and Babylon. The Gemara, the Talmud Bavli, this Gemara, we mentioned the understanding the laws of Bavel, and we also mentioned here that there was a different opinion in Eretz Yisrael, and they held that you could say part of you were exempt from the tzitzis, but there was a way you could start it and not finish and just say the last few words and skip the whole middle about tzitzis. They held is not a problem, even if you say v'amarta aleim, that's not considered starting, and therefore they would follow. They would do it that way. So Amar Abaye, so Abaye said, if so then according to us, if we want to follow what they do in Israel, so we'll say Vayomer, and we'll say V'amarta Alehem. We'll say that we'll now once we say V'amarta Alehem, then we got to follow our rules. So if we want to follow their tradition of saying V'amarta Alehem, and then we want to follow our rules that say once you start, you can't stop, means we got to say the whole paragraph. So Amar Abaye Hilkach Anan Aschuli Maschalinon, we started to call Maschali Marava because they started in Israel, and then we started and followed what they do. But keeping the Maschalinon, once we started, we have to follow our rules. Migmar Nami Gamrina, we got to complete it. Amar Rav Kana Rav Leyaschil. Rav Kana Rav said you shouldn't start. Bim Hischel Goimer, and if you start, you gotta complete it. So that's why we actually say the entire paragraph. But in Eretz Yisrael, they would skip now. Not nowadays. In Eretz Yisrael nowadays, they say the entire paragraph. This was in the time of the Gemara. There was such a tradition.
Rabbi, question.
Yes.
So if we follow according to that particular tradition, and then they go to Ani Adonai Elohim Asher Hotzeti Itchem Eretz Mitzrayim, etc., and they just skip the entire part dealing with.
Actually, not Asher Hotzeti. I think they would just say Ani Hashem Elokeichem after the Asher Hotzeti Eschem Eretz Mitzrayim. Ani, the final Ani Hashem Elokeichem.
Then you're skipping the part about the fact that. So isn't that sort of like contradicted?
Yeah, to me it is.
Contradicting what?
And the fact that you're mentioning the fact that you should be mentioning the fact that Hashem took us out of Egypt. I mean, that's the principle of the third paragraph.
So the Gemara mentioned something about that right afterwards. Let's continue in the Gemara, and the Gemara says, Chia barav Amar Ani Hashem Elokeichem tzarich lemer emes. If you say Ani Hashem Elokeichem, you have to say emes. Lo Amar Ani Hashem Elokeichem eino tzarich lemer emes. If you didn't say Ani Hashem Elokeichem, then you don't have to say the word emes. Now the Gemara asks, V'habai lad kure yetzias Mitzrayim. You're not going to say emes, and you're not going to say the Brochos, but you have to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim. So the Gemara answers the Amar Hakol Moed Hadamar Hachi. If you didn't say Yetzias Mitzrayim, but you said it in a different way, you say it by saying Moedem Anachnu Lach Hashem Elokeinu. Shoitisano me'eretz Mitzrayim, Uftisano me'beis avodim, V'asisa lanu nisem v'gvuros al hayom v'sharnu lecha. We sang for you. So you say these other words. It said, "Moedim anachnu lach." We thank you, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem our God, that you took us out of Egypt. Shoitisano me'eretz Mitzrayim, Uftisano, and you redeemed us from the house of slavery in Beis Avodim. V'asisa lanu nisem v'gvuros. You did for us miracles and powerful miracles and wonders, al hayam, on the sea, v'sharnu lecha, and we sang for you. So that is a way to fulfill the mitzvah of mentioning Yetzias Mitzrayim. In this way you fulfilled it, even though you didn't mention it, and even though you didn't say emes, ani Hashem Elokechem, emes, and that whole thing, but you did say a mention of Yetzias Mitzrayim.
But it's not psukim that comes from the Torah itself, not
Right.
like the first and the second.
Right, but it is mentioning. It's almost like the mitzvah of Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim on Pesach. It doesn't exactly you fulfill it with all your all the divrei Torah that are at your table with mentioning the Exodus. Maybe it's not an actual pasuk, or it's drushim and different giving them over the story of Yetzias Mitzrayim, even if it's not in the format of the pasuk. Nevertheless, you fulfill your obligation. Now, as we have a format, our Haggadah, but before the official Haggadahs were around, what was their Yetzias Mitzrayim? What was their Haggadah like? It was a lot of midrashic ideas that they repeated, teachings that they repeated, even though it wasn't actually verses in Vayomer. It's not exactly it wasn't the same. Not every house had it the same. They did their thing. Almost like davening used to be. Our davening was not exactly formatted the way it is now. Of course, the Ariya Kodesh added a lot to the format of the davening, and the previous different communities added certain parts to the davening, and ultimately became a official formatted davening with exactly how which tehillims to say before, and which tehillims to add in, and so before the established organized davening, it was more based on your love for Hashem and your words that you personally spoke, and you chose which tehillims you wanted to say.
Personal.
That's the way it was originally, and the Chachamim saw it wasn't established enough. So people were slacking off. So that's when it became, they needed to be more organized. And so they established it in a more organized fashion. Okay, let's see. We have a minute left. Let's start the next Gemara. I'm Rabbi Shua ben Karcha. Rabbi Shua ben Karcha says, Lama kadma parsha Shema chulu. Why is parsha Shema before the Haya im Shamaya? And we mentioned that the reason why maybe Shema should be after Vayim Shemaya, we mentioned, is even though in the Torah Shema comes before Vayim Shemaya, so that would be a reason. What's the Gemara's question? What's the Mishnah's question? And the answer is, we said from Taisvis that it's Vayim Shemaya is in the plural, and therefore there's reason to say Vayim Shemaya maybe before the Shema paragraph, the Yahavta paragraph, because the statements in the Vayim Shemaya paragraph are in the plural. And then the Gemara says, Tanya Reb Shimon ben Yochai Omer, B'dinhu sheyakdim Shema leVayim Shemaya. Really, logically, it would be right to say Shema before Vayim Shemaya. Shazel lilmay v'zel alamid, because Shema mentions about learning, and Vayim Shemaya mentions about teaching. Vayim Shemaya leVayomer, Vayim Shemaya should be before Vayomer, because Shazel Lilmay V'zel Asos, because Vayim Shemaya is about learning, or Lalame teaching, and on the side it says Lalame, and then Vayomer is Lasos doing. So we're going to stop here, but we started on we'll start on this little piece of Gemara to be continued. and have a wonderful day. Sei gesund.
Magazine. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Everyone stay safe,
Thanks.
please.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.